Hello. Today I want to do a short story on what it was like to see Frank Calabrese in court every day at the legendary Family Secrets trial. Something I'll never forget. All my past videos, I'm somewhat limited with the software and laptop that I've been using. I can only do like these 60-second slides. But now I'm going to be using StreamYard, and I'm going to be learning how to stream, going into all my court stories in more detail. Now, against his lawyer's advice, Frank Calabrese decided he wanted to take the stand and tell his side of the story, that his brother was the real killer, and that his brother and his son conspired together to steal all his millions and to keep him locked up for the rest of his life. However, the prosecution kept objecting. The judge wouldn't allow him to go on, just infuriating Frank Calabrese. Nick Calabrese testified that the 26th Street crew had an MO. They would do surveillance and sit on a guy for months. Then when the time was right, they'd surprise him, jump him. They'd usually strangle him, and then Frank Calabrese would slit his throat from ear to ear, giving him what the prosecutors called the Calabrese necktie. When Nick testified to this, Frank was smiling, laughing, shaking his head. Now, Frank Calabrese Jr. and Nick Calabrese, some of their testimony had some similarities to it. For example, they both testified that when Larry Stubich was killed by a Chicago policeman, Frank Calabrese was devastated. This was his best friend. He went to Angelo the Bull for permission to have this cop killed. For some reason, Angelo said no. Frank never got over the killing of Stubich. Now, Junior was one of the very first witnesses the government called. He was so nervous, completely pale, when he walked into the courtroom. He never once looked over at his father. And in return, his father, Frank Sr., was smiling, glaring right back at him. I can just imagine what he was thinking. Frank Sr. started out on his best behavior, but the more Junior spoke, the angrier Frank Sr. got. Now, Junior will tell anybody that goes on his mob tours or anybody that reads his book or in court that he never intended to bring down the Chicago outfit. But by him writing that letter to the FBI and wearing a wire on his own father, getting his father to talk about murders, he not only brought down his father, but his uncle and most of what was left of the outfit. There will never be another government witness that'll do more damage like Nick Calabrese did. He sat there calmly in a blue sweatsuit, never once looked at his brother, and testified to participate in 14 unsolved murders. One of them was John Mendel, one of the key burglars at the Tony Accardo house, where after they strangled him, Frank handed Nick the knife, and Nick slit his throat ear to ear without any hesitation. It's always interesting to hear and see how mob guys interact with one another. And when they play the tapes of mob guys talking shit about other mob guys, it's really cool because you had Frank Calabrese talking about Lumpy, saying when Joey got out of prison, he was supposed to be on the shelf, but yet he was sneaking around with Joe Andriacchi. And then a certain testimony by Joey Lombardo, you had Jimmy Marcello covering his face, rolling his eyes, but none of them talked to one another. Now here's Frank Calabrese's lawyer, one of the best in the country, top criminal defense attorney, Joe the Shark Lopez. He had a hell of a time trying to control Frank Calabrese in the courtroom, but Joe told me that Anthony the Hatch during the Carlisi trial was even harder to control than Frank Calabrese. But I remember at the end of the day, after hearing about Calabrese Sr. murdering, strangling, cutting people's throats, he would wrap his laptop computer cord around his big hands. Now, Angelo LaPetria told his brother Jimmy LaPetria that something should have been done about the Calabrese brothers years ago, meaning they should have split them up or killed them. Frank Calabrese and Nick Calabrese talked about the bull quite a bit at the Family Secret trial. Nick said when he extorted money from Victor Cacciatore, he was just following orders. He received no payment, and Frank Calabrese said he was the only one that could look the bull in the eye. Two of the murders linked to Frank Calabrese were Billy and his wife, Charlotte Dauber. It was a hit team that consisted of the Wild Bunch and the Chinatown Crew. Butchie, Scarpelli, Calabrese brothers, Ronnie Jarrett. They got him. They ran him down coming out of the court building and shotgun blasted him to death. When they asked Frank about this on cross-examination, Frank laughed out loud and said, "What a bad man Billy Dauber was." Nick Calabrese talked about how difficult it was to kill trucking executive Michael Cagnoni. And after several months of careful planning and many failed attempts, they decided to use a car bomb with a detonator. The first bomb they built in Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage, the bomb wasn't strong enough. The second bomb they built, the detonator almost blew off Frank Calabrese's thumbs. And under cross-examination, Frank denied it, twiddling his thumbs, showing he never got injured. Now, one of the many murders tied to Frank Calabrese was the brutal murder of Butchie Petrocelli from the Wild Bunch. Frank Calabrese despised, he frickin' hated Butch and pleaded with Angelo LaPetria many times to have him clipped. One day, Frank got his wish. They called Butchie over to Angelo's club. Angelo said, "Go take out the garbage," and these guys here killed Butchie. Now, the government in this case did an outstanding job corroborating Nick Calabrese's testimony. Nick Calabrese testified that his brother and another Chinatown associate, when they approached Tito sitting in the car, there was a Polish guy there. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was innocent, but they still had to continue with the hit. They got out of the car and shotgun blasted both of them to death. Then they tied that in with Junior. Frank Sr. Now, a few of the burglars that participated in the Tony Accardo break-in, like the Strangers in the Night, Frank Calabrese, Nick Calabrese, and other guys in the 26th Street crew would lure them to a spot with the ruse of a score, jump them, beat them, strangle them. A lot of them were tortured and given the Calabrese necktie. Tony Accardo was never charged. Now, another murder they tied to Frank Calabrese was this scumbag here, John Mendel. He was the leader of the burglary crew that broke into Big Tuna's house there in River Forest. They lured him to Ronnie Jarrett's mother-in-law's garage with the promise of a big score. There he was jumped by Ronnie Jarrett, the Calabrese brothers. That's where Frank Calabrese handed Nick the knife, and Nick slit his throat ear to ear. Frank Calabrese used to refer to Joey Aiuppa as the old man. And with his back turned to us, you got Big Stoop John Feccarata. Under direct cross-examination, Marcus Funk was grilling Frank Calabrese. Did you set up Feccarata to be killed by your brother Nick Calabrese? Frankie laughed out loud and said, "Why would I kill that guy? I was making millions of dollars with him." Nick Calabrese testified that even though his brothers liked the Spilotros, especially Michael, Frank Calabrese told him he wanted to be there. He was actually looking forward to the beatdown. But due to health issues, he was down in Florida recovering. But Nick testified that he gave his brother a play-by-play on the planning and actually what went down, keeping him informed. Now, there's definitely things that go on behind the judge's chambers and also when the jury is not present. For example, I'll never forget when Michael Cagnoni's widow yelled out loud in front of to Frank Calabrese, saying that, "You son of a bitch, you killed my husband." She had to be escorted out of the courtroom. Frank smiled and told her repeatedly, "God be with you. God be with you." Everyone was in shock. Now, one of my favorite parts of the trial is when they play the tapes, the phone recordings, or some of the prison tapes. You could actually hear these mob guys talk in their own voice, usually in code. Like when Frank was telling Junior that if the outfit were targeting the Calabrese brothers and their crew, he referred to the outfit as a Christmas tree. You'd had to whack like 15 to 20 guys to take control of the outfit. Now here's Chicago outfit associate, an enforcer, juice collector, loan shark for the 26th Street crew, Jimmy DeForty, aka Poker. He was talked about a lot at the Family Secrets trial. One day they were about to do a hit. He showed up with alcohol in his breath. Frank Calabrese was furious, slapped him around, warned him to never do it again. Frank also thought that Poker might flip, but in the end, it was his brother. Now, after the owner of Connie's Pizza testified that, yeah, Frank Calabrese and him were good friends, only to find out years later that his good friend was extorting a couple $100,000 from him. Frank's defense was, why Frank Calabrese was on the stand, was they were good friends. Frank gave him some startup money, and he showed photos of them on vacation with their families, Florida, Vegas, Lake Geneva, saying he would never do something like that to a good friend. I'll never forget seeing Frank Calabrese in court. I used to stare at this guy. Half the time he was on his best behavior, laughing, smiling, eating M&Ms, talking to his lawyer. But then when he would lose his temper, he would pound his fists on the table, scaring everybody in the courtroom, yell, swear, "Them are lies. They stole millions." You saw his temper come out. You saw the real Frank Calabrese. Here's a young Kirk Calabrese. I saw him just about every day at the Family Secrets trial. He always came alone, sat by himself, kept to himself. I'll never forget the time Frank Calabrese lost his temper in the courtroom. Frank Sr. stood up and started yelling, "Ask my son Kurt. They stole millions from me." Kurt was so embarrassed, he flushed, turned red, and stormed out of the courtroom. One of the many highlights, the main battles at the Family Secrets trial, is when Marcus Funk went to war with Frank Calabrese on the stand. They were yelling at it back and forth. He got Frank Calabrese to easily lose his temper on the stand. Calabrese said, "Did you or did you not slit Michael Albergo's throat? Did you or did you not blow up your thumb from the bombing of Michael Cagnoni? Didn't you kill John Fecarata?" Frank Calabrese's mouth, "You're an effing dead man." Frank Calabrese was on tape talking about the making ceremony and how he felt a little uneasy when Iupa was burning a holy card with a saint on it. For some reason, that kind of fucked with Frank a little bit. And then later on, when he ended up, him and the crew, shotgun blasted the Polish guy along with Chico Ortiz, he was an innocent guy that was there at the wrong time, at the wrong place. That bothered him. Now, the government, man, they don't hold anything back. At one point during the Family Secrets trial, when they were talking about Frank Calabrese, they showed all his fake IDs, union cards, driver's license, social security cards, passports, you name it. This guy had so many IDs with so many aliases, it was hilarious. Now, Junior talked about, and Senior, where a lot of the stash houses were, where Frank Calabrese kept hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash at a time, weapons, gold, jewelry, artwork, precious gems, you name it. Even after he got indicted at the Family Secrets trial, when he was convicted, the feds raided his house and found over $750,000 in cash. Now, I don't want to end on a sad note, but I just got done watching a small clip of Red Wimet, the informant. He continues to talk smack about me. I used to actually watch some of his shows. Red, I challenge you to a live debate. We could sit down. You could ask me some questions. I want to ask you some questions. We'll clear the air and find out who the real bullshitter is. Now, for everybody that likes my Chicago mob trials or my stories, please hit the like button. Share with your friends. I appreciate it. I don't mean no disrespect to any family member or certainly any victim. And for my haters out there, get a life. If you don't like my show, don't watch it. Take the wife to Walmart. Take your dogs for a walk.